Hey, so this is part 2 of the reminiscing on Tyler's 10-year anniversary here at Northwest Gospel Church. So we continue the conversation we started last week. If you didn't hear that, go back, listen to part 1, watch part 1, and then you can pick it up right here. Dude, okay, I want to ask a bunch of questions. What did you... I already asked if you planned on making it 10. When you got here, okay, Tyler at, what are you, 38?
Yeah.
Okay, 28-year-old Tyler got here, and you were 28 when you got here.
Yeah.
You were 27, I feel like, when we were interviewing, but you had a birthday, and it's in October, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So 27, 28-year-old Tyler, 38-year-old Tyler, Back to Future style, like you're able to get in the DeLorean and come forward, the 10 years, and 28-year-old Tyler sees, you're at your 10-year spot here, and he's like, hey, how do you advise him? Like, what do you say about the next decade he's going to experience in this place? And obviously there's a lot of stuff that relates to family. I mean, you went from one little child to 4. And so there's a ton of stuff in that regard, and you can address that too as well, I guess, because that all happened here within a context of a local community and the role here at the church and those, everything else, right? So 28-year-old and 38-year-old Tyler have a conversation, and you realize you're still in the same spot. Would 28-year-old Tyler be like, what? You're still there? You're still working there? Or would 38-year-old Tyler be like, dude, chill, man.
No, relax. I think 28-year-old Tyler would be like, you only accomplished how much? If I'm honest.
What does 38-year-old Tyler say?
Those 4 little kids are why I've only accomplished that much.
Oh, okay.
And that's what I've accomplished,
And then what does 28-year-old Tyler say?
He probably has a lot of questions.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think, adopting was always part of our plan.
Yeah.
That'd be like, oh yeah, we did it. Cool. We've been talking about that for years. 28-year-old Tyler might be surprised at how much work that is. Not just the adoption, but just kids in general. Yeah. I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah, I don't think 28-year-old Tyler would be surprised at the location, like where I'm at. I think that the, the naive ambition would be like, you've only released how many albums, written how many books, and done, whatever. The church is only what size? And,
Sure.
It's like, so I think there'd be questions about that.
Okay. And what would 38-year-old Tyler say? I got 4 kids, dude.
Yeah, just roll with it, man. It'll be okay.
Just chill out. Relax, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So 38-year-old Tyler goes forward 10 years. What does 48-year-old Tyler say?
The first question 38-year-old Tyler asks is, are those 4 kids following Jesus?
Mm.
Dang it. Yeah, because it'd be like 22 to 13.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so in this world, in this region, with the convictions you have, did they stick it out?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't want to think about 48-year-old Tyler.
Yeah. Wow. Mm. So, yeah, man. Oh. Okay. So, throughout this journey on 10 years, well, dude, you're talking about super important stuff. So now it's like talking about the job is kind of like, who cares?
Well, we could go backwards because, like the only good thing about Facebook is memories.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
like, here's what happened on this day.
Yeah.
And so like for the last like month, I've been like looking at it, and it's like 10 years ago, I posted this like cryptic message about maybe moving that like didn't mean anything, or like it was like, hey, one last chance to hang out, Wichita, meet me at this place or whatever. Yeah. And then like the drive out here. So it's like all these like memories. And like, I think it was yesterday or the day before that it was like Katie finally showed up, and Katie and Molly flew out because I got here a few days before. And it was like we were walking in literally what I know now is just like just trees behind a neighborhood.
Yeah.
But it was so magical to us because it was just like we live in the forest. And it was like in East Vancouver. It was like the Myers old place, like right over here, like not 5 minutes from here.
Yeah.
It was just, and you know, looking at it now, it's like, oh, that's like literally a trail behind a house. Like that is not the wild. But like all those things, you know, like the first time, like being disappointed by Voodoo Donuts and like, you know, all these things like that I'm going to see.
The first time.
Yeah. Like all these things in the memories. It's like, oh, dude, like the magic of moving to a place that was so different than where you grew up, you know,
That's
and like doing
cool.
that. Yeah, that was fun. Like those are fun memories. And so
Yeah.
the only reason I still let my Instagram post to Facebook is for the memory's sake that I can go check later. But
Sure.
yeah, that's been fun.
If you would have known what would you have thought of 10 years ago if you knew your, let's just call it career vocational trajectory here, that you would like do music the way you did it for those first number of years, and then you would sort of transition to a more kind of like executive type of role while still doing music, to then full on a few years back to fully like executive pastor of ministries. And like, I mean, could you ever have fathomed 10 years ago when you're interviewing for this job that someday you'd be like hiring the new youth pastor? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like in doing that kind of stuff.
And if you would have said that's the trajectory, I don't think I would have come.
Yeah.
You know, I always said if I don't have a guitar in my hand, I'm not working in a church.
Okay.
Like that was always my thing. Like I did not foresee a world where I would work at a church and not have a guitar in my hand. And actually, in fact, one of the guys that like almost got this job before I got here, he and I had lunch shortly after I got here, and he told me, he's like, dude, I would love to not have to sing anymore and just like be an executive type pastor and do this. And I remember thinking he was crazy. I was just like, dude, I would kill myself. Like I would hate my life. No, not a chance. And it's crazy. I mean, you grow up and you change, and
yeah.
you know,
Why did you still like talk about that journey then? Like what changed that like you suddenly having a guitar in your hand would, you know what I'm saying? Like how did that, because like you having a guitar you do have a guitar in your hand now when you want to and sometimes and whatever, but like you've embraced it.
Yeah, I think the big picture is like God has changed your desires. You know, I think like looking back at what happened, and I've told this story a bunch of times, but I don't know if I've ever told it on here, but there was one Sunday in 2000, I want to say 16, I might be wrong, but around there, where I felt really sick on a Sunday morning, and it hit like 20 seconds on the countdown, and we were supposed to like do 3 songs and then go to the connection time or whatever. And I remember like telling one of our staff members, like, I'm sick, be ready. And so we did 1 song, and then I sent it to connection time, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And then muscled through a couple more songs and ended up like just like being sick. Like it was just an illness. And a different staff member like took over music. I went home, whatever. That was no big deal. The anxiety that came that was going to happen again, like riddled me, or it riddled my brain for 2 years straight. Every Sunday, starting Friday afternoon, if I was leading, I was like, am I feeling it? Like, and it changed
that, dude.
And it changed my desires. Like my first handful of years here, Sunday mornings were my favorite time of the week. It was like, oh dude, people are going to be here. We're going to sing together. This is going to be awesome. Became my least favorite time of the week. Hated it. And there was one of those seasons where it was like, it might even be in the season where Paul told me like, stick it out till it doesn't suck anymore. Where I was just like, I hate this. Like I don't like doing this. Like 12:30 on Sunday was my favorite time of the week. It's like, oh, I have 7 days until I have to do that again. And so like, I think that kickstarted, and then the anxiety slowly went away over time. And now I don't feel it at all. But that like love for it never came back. And so, and I would say like, there's a difference between like enjoying something, I mean, like that was fun, and like loving it and wanting to pour your life into it. And that's what never came back. And so I think, but yeah, that's the thing. If you had told me 10 years ago, like, yeah, you're going to fill your days meeting one-on-one with 10 different staff members and managing them and stuff like that, I'd have been like, nah. but now it's like, that's awesome. Like, I love that. So, yeah, that's the biggest shift in me, like professionally in the last decade, is just like that. And I even remember talking to you originally. I asked you if we could make it a music director instead of a pastor. I was like, I don't.
When we were interviewing?
Yeah. Because I was like, I'm not a pastor. I don't want to be a pastor. And you're like, no, you do. you just don't know it yet. And I was like, no. And you're like, just try it, see what happens.
Yeah.
And like, and obviously pastor here didn't mean elder at the time. It was just
Sure.
like a,
different
but
world.
it was,
So why didn't you, so when that never came back, 2018, anxiety goes away, but that love for that never came back. I'm trying to even think of like, it was within a year. It was probably 2019 that you transitioned over to more executive type of role. I mean, you were 2014, 2015, you kind of, me and Brent, our old executive pastor, became like an executive team basically.
Yeah.
And so you were functioning that way practically for so many years. And then as Brent left, you were still there in that sense. But when it didn't come back in 2018, I mean, wouldn't you, I don't know, was there ever the thought of like, why do you still work here? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think it was some of the conversations you and I had in those seasons, in that season where I don't know how like blunt I was, but it was more like, I got to not do this. I got to do something else or go somewhere else. Like that's, I don't
remember you being overly blunt, but I
it's like, I'm ready to not be a music pastor anymore.
Yeah.
Like, and just, I remember too thinking like, just such stupid things as a young person, where it's like any music pastor who's more than 35, older than 35, who doesn't have like a hit song is useless. And it's just like, that's so ridiculous. You know what I mean? But it's just like,
no offense to those of you listening.
well, to me, no offense to me, like, it's just like, oh, you got to make your creative mark by 35 or you're just going to like fall off the cliff as far as like your effectiveness goes.
Yeah.
I look at guys like Paul Baloche who are in their 50s.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, he has the hits, like, like, and so again, stupid thoughts of a young person.
Sure.
But I think there was as well like that, like, okay, I got to do it by then, or I'm just going to have to phase out. And so, but, now I look at that way, that was really silly. But
when you first got here, there was like where the church was at, and it was in the midst of revitalization, but it was still a long ways away, right? And so a ton of the stuff you encountered early on in the first few years, man, and that we went through together. I mean, even hearing that episode from last week and like the person,
the biceps.
Yeah, it's like legit that person would email me, and they were here for 2-3 years. They were here when I got here, and then they were here for 2-3 years. And then it was actually when you shut down the person screaming out from the balcony in, what would that have been, 2013?
13 or 14.
Yeah, about a year into your time here. That whole crew, there was like 30 of them, all left together, including that person who legit had email Tourette's. It was like somebody who just was like diarrhea of the email, and they never like would speak to me in person at all. It was always just like the distant email weirdness. And when I would greet them in person, it would be like, hi, but just was like boldly email craziness. And that was it's so funny because we hear that now, we're like, that's nuts. But like, that was kind of a lot of stuff at the church at the time. There was a lot of that in the culture, and people really distrusting, like when you got here, of just like, yeah, you're going to blow through and blow out, and which is just woundedness that people deal with when there's a lot of transitions or there's a lot of, pain in their church experience. And so like going through that in those days, I don't know. I just like, how did that, when you came into this, were there moments in the first few years during the real heavy revitalization phases where you were like, this is not what I signed up for, or like, what the heck, or like, this is why I didn't want to be on staff at a church, or
No, that's the fun part.
Okay, talk about that.
No, like there's like, and maybe it's just when you're younger too, but there's almost like a screw you, we're going to push through and become healthy no matter what. Yeah. And I'm going to do it in spite of you. And I mean, the church I was at before this, my dad was the pastor at, from like, he took the pastoring job there when I was like 15, and it was a super, I don't think dysfunctional necessarily, but small, very old congregation. And we he and my mom and like the team around them revitalized it for a decade, and so it was like kind of normal. It was just like, this is just what you do. Like, and so I think I'd seen it, and I'd seen like the faithfulness of it in him. Yeah. And then it got really healthy. And then my dad left, new pastor came in, and it wasn't super healthy for a while. And it wasn't bad. It just wasn't what it was, Yeah. And so I think there was even part of it where it was just like, I think maybe a big difference too was the freedom here to be like, no, this is how it should be and just do it. Where in that context, it was like, no, this is how it should be. Hey, new guy who's been here for a year, is that okay? And he'd be like, no, we're doing it like this way. I'm like, oh, bummer. So I think there's part of that too.
Alignment.
Yeah. That's or ministry philosophy, in the way that that plays out. And so, no, I think that like that, those, like the first few years, it's almost just exciting. You're just like, no, we are going to like get past this and not be whatever we are right now. And so I think it more comes almost with comfortability, where it's like, oh, this is easy now.
What's funny, dude, is like you and me had that same spirit when we got here, and I was here 2 years earlier, but it was like I was 29, you were 28 when you got here. And it's like, we were young enough and we had that, I think and again, this is 10-year reminiscing, but I look at that now and kind of wonder about what's next. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, what's the next decade? What's the next chapter? I don't know. Like what,
I hope it's church planting.
Yeah.
And like the hard stuff is the good stuff, where it's like we're building something new and not like train wrecks. I mean, that'd be more fun.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Like it's like, oh man, I wonder what's next, versus like, ooh, I wonder what's next. Let's tackle that.
For
you know
sure.
what I mean?
Well, I think it is. Yeah, I think we're aligned in that, to plant and build the church, that some real major church planting, which also a lot of times takes the form, as it did with Camas, of church revitalization. Yeah. Which goes along with planting.
And there was some of that same stuff in the early Camas days.
Yes.
I found out like way after the fact that like there was some of the folks who wanted things to stay the same at the Camas location, like blamed me for it.
Oh yeah.
And I was like,
well, it was your fault.
Well, but like in reality, I was like, oh, weird. Like I wasn't even there that often. Sure. You know what I mean? Like, but it's like also like, but that's kind of, I'm cool with that, whatever. Like, I think
you know, what's funny, and this is pre-Ben even, is you were a little more the tip of the spear than I was in that regard.
Yeah, that's
right.
True,
you were, and it's like, I don't remember why. I mean, I had started the doctorate by then, and maybe there was stuff, I don't know, but you more dealt with some of that stuff than I did, which is like, I don't know that. And you and I are cut in the same way in this regard, where it's like, that does, I mean, even you just said of like the screw you, this is going to get healthy. It's like that reality of like, no, and there is a spiritual element to it, where we're not warring against flesh and blood. Like there's a reality that like the health of the local church, like the capability for people to be able to plant in a place and their church family be safe, but be on mission, be a safe place for the hurting, but also for people to utilize their gifts and be the church. Like that's a super vital thing. And it does take, not only vision, but it takes the stomach too, to like go, no, that's not who we are. No, that's not what the scriptures designate. And it's got to be different. And people that lose that plot are the ones that usually need the most, I don't know, velvet hammer was a phrase that was used a lot in our early days. And in fact, Luke was mentioning that to me today, us talking about a different thing of like a velvet hammer, where it's like, that's church revitalization, where there has to be things have to be hammered out, but it has to be done in such a way that is pastoral, but anyway.
Yeah. I was thinking through, maybe it's 10 years, or it's probably like those early revitalization days, maybe the Camas thing, maybe the previous experience being a high schooler with my dad, whatever it is. But I think one thing I've lost is the ability to care what people think about me. Like to a fault. Like sometimes Katie even says, she's like, I wish you cared what people thought about you. Because
wait, so you used to care what people think of you and now you don't?
I don't think I ever was great at that. But now I'm like, if like you were to like sit me down dinner tonight and be like, this person hates you, I would be like, okay, can you pass the chips and salsa? and there are exceptions, you know what I mean? Like there's people I like really care about, like like my close friends, family, stuff like that would really bother me if they didn't think well of me. But like just the average person, like I just
dude,
do
what
not
are you
care.
going to be like at 60? You're 38. It's like that, the dudes that like, you know, that they get older and older and older, and they just don't give a crap. Like that you're already there. Oh,
yeah.
that's
If
awesome.
I like see a complaint
Yeah.
card, like about something I did at the church, I almost get excited. You know, like it's like, ooh, this would be fun.
We need to do something, Cody,
Yeah.
to encourage him in those ways. We could plant some stuff, just like faux cards. You know, we could bring back the anonymous comment segments and just like have them all directed at Tyler. Oh
Yeah.
man,
I don't know.
So
That's
funny.
And again, I don't know what that is or why it is, but I think it's like grown over time, where it's just like
Yeah.
even more. I'm just like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And I even tell our staff sometimes, I'm like, hey, you can blame that on me if you want to.
Which is good, dude. You
Yeah.
kind of, if you're the team, you kind of want that in
Yeah.
your guy that's overseeing you, because it's like, hey, yeah, you know, that's super funny, dude. Wow.
Yeah.
Can you believe what the Lord's done here?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Isn't it nuts?
Yeah.
So
it is.
Lennon wasn't even born when you moved here. She's 9?
8.
8. Wow. Man
Yep.
alive.
Yeah, it was just us and a 2-year-old. Yeah.
Could you have fathomed at that time baptizing your kids here, like how you have with Marley and Lennon?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was something that I like looked forward to
Yeah.
from the beginning. You know, it's like I'd see baptism and be like, I'm going to do that as a dad.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that part of it was almost like one of those, bucket list is a strong word, but like one of those like desire, like I'm going to do that someday. And now I've been able to do it twice. In fact, I just baptized Lennon on fall kickoff day, September 11th,
a few months ago.
a couple months ago. And Cody, or one of his team members, was like taking photos like for the things. And Lennon's photo is perfect because she's looking at me like, Dad, because she was getting in the tank, and I could tell how like nervous she was. And I was like, I got to do something to like lighten this for her before I like talk to her. Cause if I talk to her right now, she's not going to hear anything I'm saying. She's just so nervous. And so like I Nacho Libre'd her and got in her ear, and I was like, are you ready to be baptized? and then the photo was like, Dad. And then she like loosened up, and I was able to like talk to her and, you know, pray for her real quick, stuff like that. But
Greatest moment ever. Oh, dude.
But
I wish you would have been mic'd up. Like we should have, you know, the coaches that get mic'd up on the sideline.
Yeah.
You get to, dude, have you been watching any Mike McDaniel stuff?
Amazing.
That
Love
guy, yeah, he is unreal. He's so funny. Anyway, Miami Dolphins coach.
Yeah. So no, I think that's one of the things I definitely looked forward to from the beginning. You know, I get here and you got your like Dan Garrison baptizing Isaac, who's 14 and who's now married and has a baby on the way, you know? And so it's like, you know, you see that, and it's like in that moment, I was like, oh, that'll be me.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that'll be cool. So
Hardest parts of 10 years.
Oh, I think this would go back to another thing I would tell myself, like 28-year-old Tyler, like people are going to leave, and that's cool. Like that'll be okay. Like there were guys here early on in my time. Like there was a dude named Christian who ran our front desk and was your assistant for 5 minutes, you know, like, and I remember when he told me he was moving out of town, me literally like having the thought, this church can't run without that guy.
Yeah.
And like, and just cause I loved him and like, he was a good friend, and, you know, like, and I'm, you know, there's that element to it, but, you know, a month in, 2 of our most solid musicians came to me and they were like, hey, we could just pretty much stay through the transition to help the church, but now that you're here, we're going to leave. And I was like devastated. I was like, oh, that guy's such a good guitar player and this and that. And, you know, there's been times where it's like, oh, that person's leaving. Oh, whatever. And I think like, and not to communicate like, and so nobody really matters or anything like that, but to communicate like, it's going to be okay. Like no matter who it is. Like,
so, but people leaving, the hardest part, or one of the hardest parts.
One of them.
Of 10 years in a place. Yeah.
Yeah. One of them. Yeah, for sure.
How do you deal with that? That I would say that is one of the hardest things for me. That's like that kills me.
Yeah.
And it hurt. I don't know. There are different ones in different ways, for sure. But like it kind of breaks your heart a little bit every time someone leaves, you know, depending on, I mean, somebody moves out of town, they go back, they move across the country cause they're from Kentucky and they're going back because they got the grandkids now or what, those things happen. And that's kind of like, oh, you know, and you're bummed to leave them, or lose them. But like, yeah, people leaving, even good, bad, and ugly. Some people who leave for good reasons, but it's like super sad, you know. That's been so difficult about being in one place for so long.
Yeah, I think one thing I learned about the high D on the disc early on, somebody said this and I was like, oh no, that's me. Is a high D like has a good relationship with people when they need them, and then don't at all when they don't.
Yeah.
And so I think like there have been times where I've been super intentional. I don't need that person anymore. They don't even go to this church anymore. I should not abandon relationship with them just because they no longer serve in the ministry I lead. And sometimes it's like, dude, I have 4 kids. I have a life. I can't hang out with everybody who I'd like to hang out with. I just can't. Yeah. So that's a piece of it. But like, but yeah, that like, one of our former staff members, who is at a different church now, in a different part of our state. Like I hear from them every once in a while, and they're like, hey, could you give me a resource on this? And I'm always like, oh, here's an opportunity to like have relationship, even though they no longer serve in my context and help me with stuff, So I think that's one way, to deal with it. And then other way to deal with it too is just to like remind myself of Christian Salyers. It's okay that he left. It's like, that was 8 years ago, probably now. I mean, it's
10.
Yeah. Well,
probably 10 almost.
Well, I mean,
you got here 10 years ago.
Yeah. So it was probably 8. Yeah. He was here for a year or two of my time.
Okay.
And so like, yeah, but like, it's like, you know what? Like God's sovereign, like Christian's still like a good friend, like that I talk to via social media every once in a while. But like, it's like, we're going to survive without him being here 52 weeks a year. It'll be okay. So remind me myself of like people like that. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, like, and you look back on it and you see people are here for a season, and God's sovereign in all of it, and the longer you're there in one place, you can kind of see the role that someone played for a season of time, but then how in the end, maybe it was better that they weren't there, and for them or for whatever. And okay, so the flip side of the coin, someone says to you, dude, 10 years in one spot, like, why is it worth it? Mm. What makes that worth it for you? In the sense of like not only the positive things, but like you're that guy telling the dude, don't leave when it's difficult, right? Wait till it gets easy again and stick it out, because what I 10 years in one place, what I can reflect upon is X.
Super practical thing is in the early years, you often think, I wish these people would just trust me.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'm trustworthy. Please trust me. 10 years in, they just do. And you kind of take it for granted at some point. Like, you say something and it actually matters. It's like, that doesn't happen in years 1, 2, and 3.
No.
You say something and they second guess it, or they go behind your back, or they, whatever. It's like, so that's one reason why it's where it's like, you get to a point where it's like, I say things once and people trust it, and that's cool. Like, and we have so many new people here. And it's like they're coming in just like trusting us because we've been here for, like they're new, but we're not. And like, so that's one thing. I think the other thing is like, you see God's work so much more over time than you do in a vacuum.
Yes.
Like, I saw God work here in the first 2 years I was here, but it's so much more evident a decade in, especially with the people who've been here, In fact, this past Sunday, one of our guitar players who wasn't playing the Sunday, he said, it was 10 years ago this week that I met you. And it was his first Sunday. It was my first Sunday the same day. And then another guy, one of our bass players, was standing there, and he was like, that was a good day. And because he was playing bass that first day I was here. And then Cody was down the aisle away from us, and it was like, dude, when did you show up? And he showed up 2 or 3 months later, like as a 18-year-old. And then one of our drummers was like, I played that day too. And it was just like thinking through like the life that we've all lived together.
Yeah.
And it's like, and again, it was like 5 of us. It's not a huge group that we were in that conversation with, but it's like we've walked through some of the worst days of those guys' life together, some of the best. And like so I can look at like a bearded Mike. He was one of the guys in that conversation, and I can look at that dude and be like I've seen like God work through you and in you so many times in so many ways, probably even in ways that I can't even articulate, because it's just like, dude, I've watched him grow. Like, and he was mature when I got here. He's never been like it's not like he was like, oh man, this sorry sinner who's now a Christian. This is like, but I've just watched him grow in his faith, watched him raise Caleb, and watched him and his wife serve faithfully week in and week out, what is it, over 500 Sundays now, so it's like, and so you see that, and that's beautiful. And it also gives a lot more perspective for what you're doing, and it makes the harder days easier, because you're like, you're not wondering, why are we doing this? Because you look at Mike and you're like, I get it. You look at somebody who's in the midst of their worst days differently, because of like, you've walked through some of the hardest days with those 5 guys, and you're like, I see the other side in a way that you can't 3 years in.
Exactly.
Yeah,
you think about like the parable of the sower and the seed that falls along rocky soil and falls in thorny soil. And if you look at it, just let's just say in a short term, whatever that might be, even a couple of years, three different of the seed like spring up, right? The rocky, the thorny, and the good soil. They all show seemingly fruit like in a short period of time. And he doesn't give any time on that. He doesn't say this is a week or this is a month or this is 2 years. But when you're in a place a decade, you see the reality that like there's stuff that lasts and there's stuff that gets choked out, and there's right. And so it's like, and I think truly, like when you mentioned Bearded Mike and others like them, those are the people that the longer that I'm here, the more I cherish those people who just, man, they just root and plod on in a church. Yeah. They just spend their lives there.
Yeah. You mentioned Luke earlier. His son Adam said something in a meeting that was recorded, and I've saved the recording and I listen to it rather often, and he's talking about like experienced church versus formational church, as far as like creating church to be an experience for people versus creating it like in a way that's formational for their character. And I can almost quote it because I've listened to it so many times, but he says there's so much like focus in church about creating experience. And he's like, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with an experience. He's like, but what if we figured out what it looked like to really follow Jesus, and we just did that every week after week, month after month, and just do the same thing for years, for decades, and just see what that produces. Yeah. I think when I heard that originally in 2014, when he said it in this meeting that I was in, I remember thinking like, oh, that's an aspiration. Like that's like, I'd like to see what that looks like years after years, And then I think after 10 years in one spot, you're like, oh, I'm seeing it now, and it's not like, oh, it's over. It's like, you're beginning to see it, and you see like what 10 years of just being like, okay, here's what we're going to do every week. We're going to sing, we're going to receive communion, we're going to open the Bible. We're not going to create a production. There's a church that I'm sure we'll talk about at some point on this podcast that has, they're doing the Little Drummer Boy for their Christmas performance, but they have 8 drummers hanging from the rafters.
Oh, dude.
Going, yeah. So
be
it's like
that church.
Yeah. Well, it's like, and again, it's probably some special thing that they're doing. They have good reason, I'm sure. But like,
oh, I'm sure it's phenomenal reason.
But with that, I'm like, it's like,
stop caring what they think of you, Tyler.
Yeah, it's like the experience. It's like experience versus that. It's like that's the reason to stick it out for a decade plus. Yeah.
It's been pretty crazy, man. It caught me by surprise thinking about it. Like coming, I always get super reminiscent at the end of a year because all the things. My birthday's like in January too, so I'm always like towards the end of another year of my life and closer to the end. and so I always get really reminiscent. And being that we have the same work anniversary, when I was thinking through it, it's like, man, 12 years here. And then I thought, dude, you're at your 10 year. That like hit me a little while ago, a few months ago or a few weeks ago, and it just I started just thinking about all those days. I don't know, man. I don't know. It kind of like, yeah, it's. I mean, tenure is a thing, like in the academic world, but not necessarily in the world we work in. But I don't know. It means a lot. It means a lot to me, dude. I can't fathom what. I don't know, dude. You and me doing this for 10 years together is crazy, dude. I don't know. It's crazy. Yeah. There's a lot of memories in there, and a lot of really crazy cool stuff. But wow.
Yeah, let's keep doing it.
Yeah, sure. All right.
All right.
I feel like we should say cheers. We have drinks in here. Truly, we break out the Truly at the 10 year.
Cheers.
Cheers, dude. All right, there it is.